Hello, this is Ash with the Wizard's Respite, and this is Sanctorum, a show where we talk about all things TTRPG. We do a deep dive into games, and talk about what we love about them. This is the best hobby in the world, and today we are going to be talking about one of Zach's games. Zach, why don't you tell us a little bit about what we got going on today?
Mekton Zeta! Yes, I am Zachariah with Old Man Gaming, and super excited to be on another episode of Sanctorum. Here we go, here we go. But it's my turn to pick, and I'm continuing to go through the nostalgia button for me, which are the formulative games of, like Ash has been picking, like, interesting, cool games nowadays. I have just literally been picking the formative games of Zach of Old Man Gaming's TTRPG career. So I am now to Mekton Zeta, and Ash, you'll have to watch this back, but you guys can see the duct tape on the back end. This book has been through so many battles, so many wars, and yeah, Mekton Zeta. This is an anime mecha RPG, and probably one of the first of its kind, if I do say so myself. There was Robotech from Palladium before that, but that was very specific. But yeah, are you excited to do this?
Yeah.
Okay. The coolest thing about this right off the bat, before we even get into the other stuff, I won't say the coolest thing about this, but one of the most coolest things to me was the fact that Mekton Zeta does not... It was the first game that I played that didn't have subject matter. Like, it didn't have, like, a world or lore that you had to learn
Okay.
with it. This was the first game that's just like, here is the system, create your own lore, and use this to create the system in the world. This game, like I said, it is an anime mecha game. And there are some things to Mekton that are already pre-established. They have some Imperium stuff, and they have some story blurbs in here. But you don't have to use them, and in fact, they're not really even covered in this. There are bonus books that cover some of that stuff if you want to use them. But the book itself is really much more like, hey, make your own anime with this. They even have rules for, like, Sentai stuff, which is like the Power Rangers or Voltron, the combiner
Really?
robots. Yeah, they've got it all in here. They got Transformer stuff in here, everything. And basically the idea was create your own giant robot show and play with your friends. And that was awesome to me. And while I did use a lot of their subject material and then warp it for my own ends, I think that, like, that was one of the first times I had ever encountered that in my life as a game, where it was like, oh, I could just make up the lore and this game gives me the rules for that. Great. I'm all in.
So how old were you when you picked this game up for the first time?
This was later in my life.
Okay.
Let's say 16, 17. This was well after
Okay.
the Palladium Ninja Turtles phase. Probably earlier than that. I'd probably say probably like 15, 16, somewhere in there. And a lot of this came from Mr. Mark Bell, my gaming partner to this day. Gaming partner in my gaming company. And he's a huge mecha guy. Absolute huge mecha guy. He has like a side business of 3D printing mechs, like custom mechs and stuff. Like, he loves mechs. He's got a whole room full of the Gundams that he's made, and he used to make the Gundams when he was a kid. He was obsessed with Gundam. This was definitely his game, his bag. He pulled us into this bad boy, basically, and well, turtle power. Okay, but one of the things that I played it a lot with him. And one of the things that attracted him is he's actually an engineer in his personal life. And he just loves that aspect of it. This game has in my opinion, the definitive system for creating mecha from the ground up. I will say, I don't know if it's the definitive system for using them, but the definitive system for creating mecha. If you want to create a mecha, there's not a better, tighter, more in-depth, but also easy to understand system out there, in my opinion.
Okay. Okay, cool. I'm a little bit more familiar with the Robotech and Palladium system for
Yeah.
creating. So, what would you say, like, why does this one beat like all others? Like, what is it? What do you think? Like,
For creating the mechs,
yeah.
well, the way it works, it's perfectly balanced, in my opinion. They have a straight up cost, which is just this kind of overall amount of points that you have to put in the mech. And you can put any amount to it. It's just the higher the cost, the harder it is to get the mech. So that's how you influence your game and your lore. So, like, let me just find the little section here. It's called CP, cost points. So, like, if you want like 10 to 100 CP, it's a mass produced thing. It can be produced anywhere because that's cheaper. Whereas if you're looking 401 plus CP, these are like the super mechanized beasts, the Gundams, if you will, the indestructible, the Voltrons, the mecha destroyers. And that's what's cool about it. Like right off the bat, it balances it in a way that will fit into your lore. Like if you're trying to build a grunt mech, you're trying to build within that CP range. If you're trying to build a mechanized god, you're trying to build outside that range. What I also really like about it is the minute it gets into that, it then gets into every little nook and cranny of mecha creation. From the arm servos, the leg servos, the torsos, the whole 9 yards, all the internal systems. But what's even cooler about that is they add like sensors, weapons. They have special systems like making it a mecha beast or making it like I said, a Super Sentai or a Combiner. And these all turn into cost points that then tell you how expensive this mech will be, and how rare it would be out in your world, which is just really cool. And what's even cooler about that is if you really wanted to go outside that and you wanted to be like, well, I want all my mechs in the entire game to be super mechs, you can. You're making your lore. It's just this is the guideline for it.
Okay.
Everything is measured in like kills, space, cost, and then it just kind of like spider webs down, almost like the old Mecha Warrior PC games, if anybody out there knows what I'm talking about. So if you buy a leg that's cheaper, it's not going to have as much space to put armor and weapons on it. Whereas if you buy a more expensive leg, it costs more, but you have more space to put armor and weapons on it. They even have rules for, if you get the Mekton Plus, they even have rules for like command armor, which is like armor for the giant robot that it puts on. So they just like anything giant robot is this thing. The other thing that I really like about it is the way it's presented to you is concise, simple. It takes you through it. Like it starts with like, here, hey, how much do you want to spend on your mech? Okay, here's what you buy first. Here's how much you've spent. You know what I mean? So it's it's a very easy spread out system how to, when this thing is actually really complicated, by the end, it takes you through each part, so it's never intimidating. You know what I mean? That's one thing about Palladium, especially with like Rifts and Robotech, when you get into Mega SDC or Mega DC or, you know, any of those subsystems, things get really intimidating. Hell, that's something about the 80s games that we've talked about before.
Yeah.
You know, D&D, Palladium, it was kind of almost a gatekeepery thing. Those games would get so intimidating so fast with huge numbers, huge complex systems that they didn't necessarily explain the best. We've encountered that with TMNT.
Right.
So like that's one thing I like about this game, whether it works or not in certain points. And I'm going to say right now there's definitely nitpicks coming. Definitely places where it doesn't work. It just like it explains everything to you very simply.
Okay. That's I mean, like that's super important for like especially introducing new characters. And it sounds like if this is just straight like this is the rules, not the rules of the world and everything else.
Mm-hmm.
That's really what you're gonna want to see, and what you're gonna need is just like something that is easy to follow, so that you're not thinking about that when you're creating your world and your lore. You're thinking about basically the setting as a GM, you know.
Well, and this was a 1995 game. And I feel like it's actually kind of a precursor for the way games are produced nowadays. I mean, you look at modern day games, I think it was kind of ahead of its time in the fact that, like, back in the day, in the 90s and 80s, when you bought a game, you bought the lore with it. Like, no matter what. Like, that was usually how there weren't a lot of games out there that didn't have, like, a bunch of stuff with it that you had to
Right.
know. You know, even D&D, which is a little bit more open with what you can create around it, they have very set amount of races, very set amount of gods, you know, that sort of thing
Yeah.
that you got to incorporate. I feel like this was kind of a precursor to some of the more modern games, which is like, here's a system, like Savage Worlds. Like, here's a system, it's just a system, do what you want with the system. Which is, well, honestly, the foundation of the way I work on games nowadays, which is just like, here's a system, what do you want to do with that system, you know? And I
Yeah.
think that's a much more modern take on things. I think they were kind of ahead on that, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And now, so you've been playing this for a long time. Do they ever come up with how are the expansions? Because um in like a lot of the modern systems, exactly what you were saying, like it is a lot of, you can just grab the system and go. But there's also books that like, okay, I grab the system, but I'm gonna need some help. Maybe
Yeah.
I'm a first time GM, or whatnot, or I'm a little shaky with this system, and I just need some help. How does this game compare to that from your memories as growing up?
You know,
Like,
I
do they give you
wish,
supplements or?
yeah, I wish I had the one supplement that I loved. I don't know what happened to it. But they had a supplement that was like straight up, it had every mech, they had a full timeline of an entire war, a saga, all the heroes that happened within that saga, like something that was pre-written for you. That it mimicked a lot of tropes. Like when I read it, like
Okay,
it was like very Robotech here and then very Gundam here, you know, and
okay,
stuff like that. But you had they had a whole book that was a little system. They also and that one, I can't remember what that was called. I believe that was the Mecha Manual Volume 2, which was the whole Imperium War. Mecha Manual Volume 1 was a little rough. What Mecha Manual Volume 1, which I still have, was like, they had like two or three mechs from like all these different possible things that you could do with it. You know what I mean? So
uh-huh,
the mechs had like flair text, and then they kind of expected you to take that flair text and run with it and add more mechs and stuff and flesh out the world.
okay,
Um, that wasn't as helpful, but the Imperium one was. There was also Mekton Zeta Plus, which I still have here, showing the crowd. Mekton Zeta Plus was awesome because it was just literally like more rules, like just more stuff to do with your mechs, more stuff to do with your characters, more stuff to do with more weapons, more interesting stuff. And
yeah,
then there was also, but if you were still somebody who needed supplements, there was a lot of different supplements like that. There was also the, oh man, Starship Brigade, Starlight Brigade, something like that. I cannot remember the name of it. I didn't actually own that book; somebody else did, but it was a really cool book, which had another like full like enclosed world that you could basically play in. So if you didn't want to create your own world, there
okay,
were supplements out there for you, but this was definitely designed more for somebody who wanted to create their own lore, but didn't want to create the system for it.
okay, okay. Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, like for me, like from the very beginning, it's all about custom creation. I've really liked homebrewing and all that stuff.
Mm.
But I also know a lot of DMs that get just a little overwhelmed by all of it,
Yeah.
during game time. So, having something to fall back on is also pretty handy.
Well, and supplements are nice, man. I when I was a kid, it was always like, well, when I was younger, it was always like, I got to run my own thing. I'm never going to use a supplement. Got to create my own thing from scratch. Now, in my later years, I definitely find it very useful to have a supplement there, especially when you're trying to run a bunch of stuff. Like right now, we do this. I run a lot of streams online. I also run my
Right.
company. I run my YouTube site. And we're playing TMNT as well. And it's really nice to have some supplements that I enjoy, and then I can just modify them so that I don't have to worry every week about like, oh god, I've got like Astral Drive. I love playing Astral Drive. Anybody out there? You can check us out. We stream bi-weekly, stealth plug, bi-weekly on Wednesdays at 9:30. Um,
It's a blast.
it's a
It's a lot of fun.
blast. the entire world, game, and everything has come from me, so I have to keep, like, every week I have to have more stuff written down, even though the game is simple and made to be simple and easy for that kind of thing. Still, I gotta have stuff for you guys every week. Sometimes Wednesday, 7 o'clock rolls around, I'm like, I don't know what the fuck I'm gonna do. You know what I mean? Whereas the TMNT thing, I'm never gonna have that problem. I've got a bunch of, like, random encounters. I got stories in there. It's great. So supplements are nice. Done. Yeah, I don't think anybody should get like shit for running supplements. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and realistically, at the end of the day, when you're running supplements, you could run them all the way through, but I think everybody I know always just sort of hammers out their own stuff through it anyways. You know, like they'll take like something from the supplement and they're going to go with it. Even if it's just during game time, they're going to take a supplement and be like, well, let's go in this direction instead, and then just make it work, because that's improv. That's part of the fun of the game.
Yeah. I think that, like, the only time supplements get rough, and game masters out there, we've said it a lot, and I'll say it again. Game mastering is not a rock and roll. As much as I like rock and roll, it's not rock and roll. It's jazz. It really is. And I hate jazz in every other form. but game mastering is jazz. It's improv. It's reacting to your players. So if you're going to run a supplement, as a game master of 30 plus, well, would it be 30 plus years? No, it'd be about 30 years. As a game master of going on 30 years, let's say it that way, and you're going to run a supplement, you have to still be prepared for the players to just do their own fucking thing, and you have to let them. Don't railroad the player into any decision. And that's the key, is that you have to make sure that the players are still, like, have player agency. And, like, if you just run a supplement word for word, part for part, period for period, it's not going to be fun for the players, because your players are humans, and they are insane, because all humans are insane. So they're going to be like, I just want to go eat hamburgers or some craziness like that, and you have to find some way to make that interesting. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, yeah, and that's really good advice, especially I think for people who are just trying to jump into the hobby and look at these things. Supplements are there to help, not be a crutch.
Oh yeah,
they can drag you down if you're not using them correctly. You know, like anything else. Like,
yes,
you got to use it the right way for how it's supposed to be used. And
I'm not going to name names, but the one time I played not the one time, one of the times I played a Star Wars RPG. This guy wanted to run a Star Wars RPG. I had never played under him before, and I was excited. I made a character that was a pilot. That's what I like to do in Star Wars. I think the space battles are cool. I hate the Jedi thing. I think the space battles are cool. That's what I wanted to play. So I made this pilot. He tried to talk me out of being a pilot to start. Already we're in trouble now. Try to talk me into being a Jedi, which I don't want to be a Jedi. And I want to be a pilot. And he's like, well, okay. Yeah. So we were a pilot, and then I showed up. And I'm going to tell you right now, this guy had a map and miniatures for everything. I mean, role-playing scenes. Like, you're in a bar just talking, and it's like you have to move your character, your little figure over to talk to people. This is one of the... Yeah, this is like... These things are there to help. You know what I mean? I don't personally like miniatures, because of the fact that I think it takes agency away from the player. You're seeing those miniatures, you're seeing them on the board, and I'm not knocking people who use miniatures, okay?
There's an argument.
This is gonna turn into a miniature digression. This is our digression. Prepare for our digression, ladies and gentlemen.
Where are we gonna go?
Prepare for the digression. Yeah, there's an argument to be made for miniatures and not. I'm a theater of the mind guy. I always have been. We're actually going to discuss that later with Mekton. But one of the things that I don't like about miniatures is that, okay, when somebody's describing a fight to you, right? Like somebody's like, okay, all right, he comes at you with the gun. You catch him with the gun. You hit him with your knife. You stab him here. He falls backwards. You're seeing all that action in your head. You're seeing it all play out. And you're seeing it in your own way play out in your head. Your imagination is playing it out in a completely different way that is probably the most cool to you. The minute I put two miniatures next to each other on a map, okay, and then I still say all that stuff, the only thing you see is those two miniatures on a map. That's something that always drove me nuts about miniature play. I understand that it makes it much more like... I'm not going to lie. There are definitely times where I wish I had a minute, like a big 5-person battle. They're taking on like 10 enemies, and it's like, okay, well, was I behind him or behind him or behind him? That gets complicated. I'm not saying that doesn't get complicated. We've definitely been in points where I still take out a piece of scrap paper and go, all right, Dude A is here. Dude B is here. You are here. He is shooting from here. Still, I tend to lean towards that theater of the mind because... the whole point of role-playing, to me, is the power fantasy. That's why you're doing it, that escape from reality. And to give a person the best power fantasy is to let their brain do with the information you're giving them the coolest thing that it can possibly do. You know what I mean?
For sure.
And that's one of the reasons I lean towards it.
I definitely understand what you mean. I've sort of gone back and forth on this one. Like right now, I'm using maps and tokens and miniatures, but I've also done it the other way. I like them both for two very different reasons. The thing that I liked about the miniatures is basically exactly what you said. Like me straight up, I cannot remember numbers.
Yeah.
So when I say somebody's like 60 feet away, 2 minutes later, they're going to be 90 feet away. 2 minutes later, they're going to be like 10 feet away. And it's like, I'm lost. I'm just gone.
Right.
I do not have a mind for numbers. They drop right out of my head. So having that there, it helps me just keep track of the chaos.
Yeah.
Also, I played, I have, I think you've mentioned this before too, but I have ADHD. I have a player actually in one of my games who also has it. Just having something to zero in on sometimes helps us out a lot.
Yeah.
But at the same time, well, first off, I would never do anything that is not combat in a map. I would never do a bar. I would never do anything like that. Most of the time, if it's like a random combat, I'm a little iffy as to whether I'll even have the map or anything like that ready, so I'll just say screw it, theater of the mind. It's when it's like, I got 50 guys on the field, and they're all coming towards 4, people, and they have to just start going, like, crazy here. And
yeah. It's, I'm with you on the numbers thing. My thing is, so, I don't actually like to talk about this on camera that often. I have definitely mentioned it to you, but never on the episode, or very rarely have I mentioned it on a stream or anything. I actually also have been diagnosed with ADHD. It actually explains a lot in my life, but I don't like to mention it because I don't know, it feels weird, you know what I mean? Because then it's like, this is going to sound bad against anybody with ADHD. I don't think this way. If you say you have ADHD, that's totally fine. I'm just saying that, like, I never want somebody to look at me as I'm saying it to use it as an excuse for something. You know what I mean? Like, so I tend to keep it to myself. This is probably going to be one of the very few shows that I talk about it. But since you bring it up, it's really rough. My thing is, I'll say words out of order, or I will say words that don't make sense in the right place. But with the numbers, I will see in my head, like, I'll see in my head a distance between two characters, and then I'll say a number, and it's the wrong fucking number. And then somebody's like, well, if they're only 30 feet away, I'm just going to do this. And then I'm like, well, it's not 30 feet. They're actually, it's like this far, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah. Can't you like,
right.
Yeah, that far.
Right. So, like, I understand where you're coming from that. I mean, ADHD's tricky. I've come to kind of love it. I don't think I would be able to accomplish the things I have accomplished in my life without it, which is really weird. But like the way the way that games come out of my head, the way I manage the Old Man Gaming. I don't think I would be able to do that without these random fucking butt-ass thoughts just jumping into my head at random times. So I used to kind of hate it, but now I kind of find it to be like, I don't think I would be able to do the stuff I do without being it. So I've kind of come to accept it, and that's one of the reasons I don't talk about it much. Also, is it's kind of like, I don't know, like if I wasn't ADHD, I wouldn't do half the shit I do.
Oh yeah, like
I definitely
that's
would be
totally
much
fair.
more easy to manage as a husband to my wife. It'd be a lot
Yeah.
easier for her or my friends around me when they're talking about something else and I'll randomly just start talking about a different subject because my brain just went there. Like, I can't imagine that the people around me don't have a very hard time with me. But for me and the things that I've accomplished, and I just don't think I would be able to do any of this without it, honestly, which is kind of weird to think, you know?
I know, I totally get the, I know, I'm like right there with you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's what it kind of is I know I understand the concern with the excuse. I don't,
Yeah.
you know,
I've never
obviously
heard you
the
mention
world
it before really on channel either, so
the world's changing, and at this
yeah.
point, like, whatever. I don't use it as an excuse. I'm not using an excuse for anything. I do
Right.
screw up, and when I screw up, I'm like, well, damn. But
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Same here.
I I also though like I think it's not it's I want to even like for me personally and myself, and I want to like apply this to anybody else by any means, but for me personally, I don't see it as like a disability or anything. It's just it's
Yeah.
like a different way of it, like thinking about things.
Yeah.
Like mathematicians think about things in a certain way.
Yeah.
Doctors, with that
Yep.
aptitude, their mind just works different.
Yeah.
Like for me, I just think it's a different way, and sometimes it's messy. Like a mathematician might be messy in more of like a language sort of
Yeah.
situation, and a super linguistic person might be messy in a more
Yeah.
math type person. And like this is how I think. Sometimes messy in life.
Yeah.
Sometimes though, I get really creative. Sometimes like ADHD also zeroes me in on things so that like all I'm thinking about is the one thing. I'm super focused, and I will be so out like every like a meteor could hit my house and I wouldn't even know it.
Right.
Um,
Right. Same
the
here.
zeroing
Yeah.
in thing, you know.
I think
But
that like who knew this was gonna go here, but
I know, right?
I think there's I've said this before. Humanity's a spectrum, like a complete spectrum. Anybody who thinks like one thing is like one way or another way, you're insane. Like humanity is just degrees of something, everything. So,
Yeah, for sure.
and I think ADHD could definitely be a disability if it was like cranked up to 10 or 11. I could definitely see it. Um, so I don't want to like disparage anybody out there who
Right.
takes pills for it or something like that. Like, do what makes you feel good, what gets you through a day. You know what I mean? The only person who can really decide what works for you is you. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
yeah, it's really weird. It's a really weird thing. And what I find strange is like it's kind of an eye of the beholder thing, and I become envious of anybody who can stay focused on those like one things for an extra like Phil Billy, friend of the show, friend of us, very focused. He can do numbers like in his head like that. He's
Mhm.
very good at the system. Whatever system he's playing, and you guys can see us when we're playing Astral Drive. I'll forget the rules, and he will be like, "Oh, I've got this many shots." He keeps he keeps track of how many rounds he has in his head. He's got it all there. I couldn't possibly do that. There's just numbers and ideas floating around in my head, and then there's a completely unautomated like gotcha machine just grabbing them randomly and then throwing them out my dumb fucking mouth half the time. So, but at the same time, like it allows me to be very creative in a way I don't think that others can very easily get to. But yeah, And I wasn't. I do want to make it very clear. I was not accusing you of using it as an excuse or anything like that.
No, I know. I got that. Yeah,
I
for
just
sure.
we went to a weird place, but I didn't. Every episode has had a strange digression that I've noticed. That's just
Yeah.
like flowed into a weird place. But so anyway, back to the game that we're talking
Right. Game
about.
talk.
Speaking of crazy stuff and customization, which we were definitely not speaking of. One of the things that I absolutely love about this game was with the exception of the Ninja Turtles, like predetermining what animal that you
Hmm.
got. This was the first game that I ran into procedural generation, like in any form whatsoever. So that's kind of formative for me because I'm kind of obsessed with it now. And what I'm talking about is this was the first game that I ever played. I don't know that it was the first game to have one, but it was the first game that I encountered with one. And it's a life path. So when you generate your character, right, in this game, you can just come up with a backstory if you want to. They say it. But instead of just coming up with a backstory, they have this thing called a life path, which just allows you these series of charts to basically go through it and decide your entire background for your character. This was the coolest. I made everybody roll on this. I thought this was the coolest thing. I loved it because it gets all the way into like what enemies you have, whether or not you're in love, what your romantic life is like. It will get into your physical appearance. It gets into how you are supposed to act, which I absolutely loved. I love the idea of generating a character that was just nothing like me and then having to try and play them. And more power to my players. I love them. We were all very young, so anybody who ended up rolling silly and fluff-headed very rarely was able to capture that in game form. But like, it was just so cool. I love the enemies chart. You got to roll to see if you had a mortal enemy to start the game, and then if you did, there was a special chart that told you how the hatred started, when the hatred started. Do you hate them? Do they hate you? Is it mutual? Like, loved it. Like the game is the life path is one of my favorite things. It starts with money and family, parental mysteries, family situation, family standing, parental fate, which is whether they're dead or alive or friends, family crisis, you can decide how many siblings you have here on E, familial goals, are you trying to do something because of your family? Friends, do you have any friends already established, which is awesome for a game master. Oh, he's got a best friend. I can just play that out. Enemies, already told you about that, but romantic life. Are you involved in a romance? Have you been involved? Have you never been involved? Then it would be love, like whether you are in love, not in love, on prowl. Are you single? Are you trying to date? A tragic love affair. Did they die? Are they gone? Did they leave you? Did they dump you? And then it would actually go into physical and personality traits, which had hair color, hairstyle, eye color, personality traits, thing you value most, your most valued possession, person you most value in the world. And then there's actually extended life paths, like even more like life path options in the Mekton Plus book. This was just so cool to me, to the point where I would actually use that later in life, just the life path for other games. Like I'd be like, we're just going to really quickly roll on the life path here because
Yeah.
it was just
It
so
sounds like
cool.
you could use that for like just character creation across the board.
Well, and that's the thing. The actual life path in Mekton does not give you any rules to Mekton. Like it doesn't like make your character any better or worse. It just literally decides your background, procedurally. With that, like you can literally use that table for any game, and it will just about work. Like any game, with a little bit of minor tweaks. Like, so I would use that whenever somebody showed up and were like, "I want to play, but I don't have a character." I'd be like, I'd pull out the Mekton Zeta. I'd pop open the life path. I'd be like, let's roll that character up. Let's see what you're playing today. And I think that was just one of the coolest tools I ever had as a long-term game master. And when I was younger, you can ask all of my Cleveland Heights friends, I was the game master, period. That was it. End of story. If we were playing, I was the game master. So, like, that was just a huge tool for me when we were like, let's try this game, a one-off maybe. Somebody's like, I don't have an idea. Life path, baby. Life path. It was just, I loved it.
I can see that being so useful for one-offs and like for those really like tight games where you're probably gonna be like it's either gonna be a one-off or like just a few
Yeah.
sessions or something like that, or with those brutal ass games where like you want to have a
Mm-hmm.
cool like backstory and all this stuff, but there's a good chance your character's gonna die, like
Yeah.
because that's how that game rolls. I could see just grabbing that thing and throwing it in there also. That's pretty cool. That's an awesome mechanic.
It's absolutely awesome mechanic, and it's just like I said, like universally useful. I listen. I know you've listened to him too. It's his podcast, Roll and Tell, um,
Yeah,
which I'm kind of
yeah.
obsessed with right now. I'm only through like 6 episodes, and I know there's like some like 60 on there, so slowly working through it. But they procedurally generate everything. They procedurally generate their characters, the world, everything they're playing, which is really cool. It's really exciting. It blew my mind that they didn't use a life path. I think like life path was like, and I'm sure they had something for it, but like the life path is like for me the penultimate background generator in gaming.
Yeah.
To this day, well, not recently, but there were a few times where I would get to play in other people's games, and I would literally just, I don't have any ideas. I'd whip this out and make some rolls, and then I'd use it to craft my character for the game that people didn't even know I would use it to craft that character. But it would
That's such a
just,
good idea.
yeah, just give you that motivation. It's just a really, really cool, useful tool for information. And man, did I love it as a game master when somebody would use it, because they're already generating the characters. They're already generating
Hmm.
their NPCs right there in front of them. I've got the backstory for their enemy. I've got the backstory for their friends, their
Yeah,
siblings, their family. I already have their entire cast when they generate that life path.
that's real cool. That's really cool.
Yeah, yeah,
And I'm thinking like the highly mechanical like nature of this particular book, as opposed to being like a fully fleshed out like this is your universe, but
right.
more of like this is your mechanics
Mm-hmm.
make a universe. Um, just sort of like I would imagine that this is also mechanically just written out so that it's easy to just extract it,
Yes.
read it, use it wherever you want.
Yeah. There's like 4 pages life path, and you just roll through it. You need a D10, and then it's done. I I think that what was I gonna say? Something else I was gonna say. Oh, uh, the other thing that I really liked about this, right before I get into nitpicks, because I know we're getting there, and it is going to be about combat. The one thing I did like about combat, before I get to the nitpicks, is they also have these really, really fun special critical hit charts, which is great. So, like, if you, when you hit somebody and you deal enough damage to go past their armor, you roll, well, first you roll on a mecha random hit chart, a d10. It tells you where the mecha is hit when you hit them. But if you roll a 10, you roll on a special chart, which is a bunch of crazy, crazy extra, like, stuff that could happen to them. And then you can potentially roll on a cinematic hit chart, which is even more insane. So, like, just to go through a couple of these for you. So, like I said, mecha random hit chart. You got the head, torso, pod, which is kind of like the cockpit. Right side limb, left side limb, other, which is like a tail, a wing, or whatever. And then roll on the special hit chart. Special hit chart. 1 to 2 is a weapon, randomly gets chosen. 3 is sensors. 4 is flight system. 5 is a shield mount. 6 is other, random subassembly. 7 is the cockpit. 8 to 9 is cinematic damage, and 10 is a power plant, meaning you go boom immediately. You know power plants from the reactor from among the Starlight wreckage.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You don't want that to get hit.
No.
Yeah, that's a bad one.
And then the cinematic hit chart: hydraulics hit, blunt hit, mech suffers double damage, sensor overload, flight system cuts, thruster malfunction, ammo explosion, random weapon malfunctions, control jam, system shutdown, power plant overload. Like, love those. Love those charts. Love those, like, oh no, it's time for everybody to go boom. I love random, like, critical explosion charts. I just always have.
Cool. Yeah, that sounds real cool. And it gives you plenty of opportunity to, as a DM, I would imagine, to really describe some pretty awesome awesome scenes there.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I had a lot of fun with it. A lot of fun with it on that level. Did you end up to getting a chance to look over any of it?
So I tried, and my ADD,
There we go.
um,
Kicks right in.
Jesus, I honestly like I got mixed up straight up. I read the wrong book.
What? You read
I
the wrong
know,
book?
man. I read the wrong book. I mixed up my mech books, and I read over the wrong book. So I walked into this one very unprepared.
That's okay.
Um,
That's okay. I'm prepared. I've, all honesty, I've walked into a lot of these unprepared. So.
I mean, it's crazy because like I was like, okay, cool. I mean, I had a crazy week, but I was able to really catch up today. I walked into this, and we didn't even talk about before we started filming.
Yeah, yeah, we didn't.
What we're doing, and then when we started filming, and you said the name of the book, and I was like, oh, that's not the book I looked up.
What book did you look up? Just out of
Um,
curiosity.
I did look up, and actually it came back to. I read this when I was a kid. I did look up Robotech.
Oh.
And I was like, I don't know if it's because I read it
Oh.
when I was a kid,
I
if it
get
was
it.
too
I get
soon,
it.
but like
It's
something
that.
broke in my head, and I was like, oh, and it's Palladium. I
I
got
had
this.
just
This is
talked
cool.
about Palladium a lot, so yeah, I get it. I get it. No, that's totally
Yeah.
fine. So I guess nitpicks are all on me then, right?
Unfortunately, tonight they are.
That's okay. I love the sound of my own voice. The the my biggest nitpick. Okay, my biggest. I have two giant nitpicks for this game, and they were always my nitpicks back in the day. Uh, my not as big nitpick is all the combat rules. While they are you're able to take it out of them, they're all for hex based like map
Mm,
mech stuff. You can do theater of mind with this one a lot easier to say than say like your battle techs or whatever. But
okay.
it's very obvious that like the distance they want you to travel is an amount of hexes, and this is how you get the amount of hexes and stuff like that. It's convertible, but it's very there's a lot of hex based talk. I hate maps. Talked about this
Okay.
already. I hated
Yeah.
maps even more when I was younger, so that drove me nuts because I had to kind of like on the fly be like, all right, well, hex is blah 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 blah. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
My next biggest nitpick, and this is the biggest problem I have with the entire game, is the game is slightly broken, and here's why. So for a character, right?
Mhm.
Here's your stats, your main stats: intelligence, cool, reflexes, attractiveness, empathy, tech ability, luck, move allowance, body type. Okay?
Okay.
None of this matters in a mech. Only reflexes matters in a mech. That's it. So like intelligence helps you get skills. Fine, but even if your intelligence is low, you're going to dump it into the mecha piloting, the mecha shooting, the mecha skills to be good at that. Your
Right.
cool is like your cool under pressure, your and your ability to like sweet talk people and stuff. That's fine for role playing. Doesn't help you in a mech. Your attractiveness obviously doesn't help you in a mech. Your empathy doesn't help you in a mech, which I think it should, but it doesn't in this game. That's just like reading people and whatnot. Your tech ability can kind of help you because you could be like a grease monkey, but it doesn't really help you in the mech area. Your luck does give you luck points that you can spend that allow you to influence rolls, which is really nice. I love
Okay.
any game that has that like fall back on this before you die sort of mechanic.
Hmm.
Move allowance only works for you outside the mech. Body type, okay, doesn't matter how strong you are if the mech explodes. So
Yeah.
the only stat, the absolute only stat that matters in combat is reflexes. Nobody who played this with me didn't put all their points into reflexes. And it
Sure.
just
Of course.
yeah, it just and who can blame them? when you tell them like the only stat that's going to really matter is reflexes, they're going to pick reflexes. It does not matter. That always to me was very counterintuitive to good system building. Now, I do want to say right off the bat, somebody's going to counter me by saying the only thing that would matter in a mech is reflexes. So realistically based. Okay, I get what you're saying. Because really, you're piloting a big video game when you're in a mech. That's the basic idea. So it's twitch reflexes. I get that. However, it's counterintuitive because the players in real life, a person doesn't get to decide their reflexes. They're that fast or they're not that fast. You get to create your character. So nobody's going to play a character with low reflexes. They're just not. There's no reason to in these games.
Yeah.
Whenever I did homebrew a mecha game later on in my life that was relatively popular among my friends, the first thing I did was I made every stat matter in the mech. If you were smart, that had some bearing on mecha pilot. Reflexes had some bearing on mecha piloting. Strength even had some bearing on mecha piloting. So that when you're getting into that mech, you're changing how the mech reacts to you instead of just, I've got the highest reflexes score, I'm going to roll really good.
Yeah.
So the other thing is, too, you add your reflexes to a D10, so you would get this, like, real power gamey real fast. Because if somebody has, like, a 10 reflexes and you're rolling a D10, what's the point of rolling a D10 at that point? You know what I mean? Like, you would quickly get to this point where, like, it's 15 versus 5. That guy can't win, period. Like, you're going to shoot him down and hit him. That's it. So, like, the battles would almost be like a foregone conclusion. So, like, when you put everything into that one stat, that's all they need to make a great character. They're not going to not put it in that. Even the least power gamey person in the world is going to have a decent reflexes. You know what I mean? Because they know that they're going to be useless without it. And I think that, like, that was my biggest problem with this game ever, was that everything was that stat. Everything was that stat. And it drove me nuts when I ran it. It drove me nuts when I played it. Because you just end up with this group of, like, just reflex hounds. And it was just, like, this one stat comparison, you know?
That definitely seems like it drives, definitely pushes the power gaming and, like, hard. Yeah. It's an obvious target, you know, like, it's just too you have to do it.
Yeah.
Because if one person does it, everybody has to.
Right. It's not even like an optional rule that as a player you can see as broken and just be like, well, I can do that or I can just not do that. It's not that. It's like, I have to have that to be competitive, period.
Right.
You know, especially if, like, if I'm playing in a group of 4 people and Hank over here has a 12 reflexes and I've got a 5, I know the game master has to throw people out at us that are at least a reflexes of 8 or 9 to be able to challenge Hank. So I can't be at a 5 because I'm just going to get my ass kicked. Like, it creates this serious balancing issue where everybody has to be on that same reflexes score. It just drives me nuts. There is some balancing with the mecha you pilot because the mecha, like, depending on the subsystems and what you do with the mecha, it also has its own specific reflexes scores for whatever you're doing. So, like, gunnery will have a different modifier to your reflexes depending on the mecha than piloting and stuff like that. Same with the skills. The skills also can influence how good you are in certain things. But it still all hinges off that initial reflexes score. And as long as it hinges off that reflexes score, that's the thing. That's the core. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's what they're boosting. And it just drove me nuts when I would play. I couldn't find a really good way around it other than just make my own game, which is what I ended up doing. But my game never had as good a mecha construction as that. And that's something that always bugged me. You know?
Yeah. No, I can see that. It is. I can see how, like, how they can be pretty frustrating too.
Yeah.
Because I mean, like you were saying, like, and it's almost like an obvious hole, like, to be having there. You know, it's an obvious, like a pretty big chink in the armor. Because if you look at most games, they do try to spread out the necessity of the various stats so that every stat has general importance that you
Yeah.
could run into in any point in time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and I could see like a plenty of stats being available. Like intelligence, I could totally see being available for
Hmm.
a certain combat style. Um, where like maybe your combat style is more like um dealing with sort of status effects for the mechs. So like
Right.
you're like sending out signals or beams or something like that. But you have to be precise about how you
Hmm.
disable the opponent's um mech
Yeah.
because that's your role. You're not the going like slice, you're the
Right.
disable guy,
Right.
or something like that.
And they could have very easily, I feel like, made some of those stats be much more like useful to the mech, even though it's not necessarily an intuitive decision or a realistic decision. But hey, you're making an anime game. What's realistic about anime? Like, just do the thing that makes sense, you know. And
Yeah.
somewhere along the line, I feel like somebody missed the book the missed the boat on that and just poured it all into reflexes. It just still drives me nuts.
Well, here's another thing that you could do. Like, when you were listing those off, was there like an endurance
Yeah, there's a body type.
body type? Okay. So, I mean, one thing I don't know. Obviously, they're not doing it with this book, but maybe a human can only be in a cockpit for so long.
Right.
Like that's kind of reality.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
Pilots have the only ability to be in their fighter jets for
Yeah.
so long. Um, and so endurance can make a big difference. If you're counting down your endurance and maybe that starts to add negative effects to
Yeah.
your reflexes.
Yeah.
Don't forget, don't discount endurance and stamina or stamina or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. There are
Um,
creative ways you could add those stats in. Definitely.
yeah, interesting. Okay. That I can definitely see that nitpick. I think you definitely pinpointed an issue.
Well, I think all that's left is for you to pick our game or topic for next time.
Okay. So this one's actually going to throw you for a loop.
Okay, I'm excited about that.
So I mentioned this to you a couple of times, I think in different areas, but I'm actually going to go complete different direction
Okay.
and do a TTRPG that I have never played. I'm going to play pretty soon,
Ooh.
but there's a lot of really interesting things about it, even though it is definitely well out. I'm not the target audience for this game at all.
Right.
Um, Hero Kids.
Oh, the family game.
Family game. Yeah, I did all that
Okay.
research on family gaming as a genre and sales trends in the
Mm-hmm.
that genre, and I found that game, found how much of a following it was. All these people talking about it, how that helps their family, just have good family game nights, all this other stuff, how it works, and I just got intrigued. I had to buy it. I'm running it for a friend. She is the caretaker of somebody who is developmentally challenged,
Oof.
and he's been wanting to play Dungeons and Dragons with us for the longest time. Um, but that's a really
Might be
hard
too
game
high a
for him.
level for that
Yeah,
sort of thing. Yeah.
yeah, and I've been kind of hitting my head against the wall trying to figure out how to fix Dungeons and Dragons. Um, but this game, it's got like a age scaling from 5 to 10, so it gets more complicated as your kid grows older.
Really.
Um, yeah, yeah, and so there's a lot of applications and for game tables out there, and I got kind of excited about it. Again, I personally am not the target audience for this. I'm not a teacher. I don't have kids, but from a mechanical point of view, from a game design, a game developer point of view, I think you and I are going to have some pretty interesting stuff to talk about.
I really, really want you to tell me about how that game session goes, whether we're on camera or not, because that sounds really cool. I think it's really cool that you're doing that, honestly. I'm constantly trying to figure out how to get my kid more into role playing games. And in fairness, I don't want to force her. That's one thing. I see a lot of I see a lot of parents on all sides. I find it funny when some of my nerd friends, no names, but some of my nerd friends will be like, "Well, I'm never going to be that parent that forces my kid into a sport," and then they've got them like doing fucking role playing games. Like forcing a
Yeah.
role playing game night down the throat, and I was like, well, what if they want to do sports and don't want to do that? So like, I never want to force anything on my kid. I'm pretty like serious about that. Like either way, it's not good. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah.
But I'm always looking for ways to get her interested. And I found a couple of little ways. We've gotten her to play a little bit of stuff. So I was kind of coming up with something because you had actually told me that was a good area to make a game in, so I was coming up with some ideas. So I'm very interested to hear about that, and I will have to look that game up. I've heard about it. I have never read a page of it, so I'm gonna have to look it up, or at least pretend to look it up, and then let you let you lead the entire podcast. Yeah. So that's exciting, man. That's exciting. I think that's
I
really cool.
think I think it's different. It's a little different for what we're doing here, but
Yeah.
I think yeah, well, like I said, from a game developer point of view, and how we do things, we get really nerdy about like
Yeah.
the craziest stuff, like
Yeah.
rolling on tables and everything.
Yeah.
I think we got some cool stuff to nerd out about on that one.
Um, I do want to say out there really quickly to everybody. I know you're watching. I see the views. There are people watching the show. Comment below. Talk to us. We'll read your comments out on the air. And more importantly, we want your war stories so bad. By war
Yes.
stories, I mean your cool moments in gaming, your cool moments of game mastering, your most exciting like war stories and fun stories. Those are the things we really want to read out on the show. So please, if you're listening to this, if you're watching this, if you're listening to this on Spotify or something else, go on to the YouTube channel Old Man Gaming, find the episode and comment below, or find the episode, join our Discord and message us because we want to hear your war stories. We really do. And we want to read them on the show.
Yeah.
Um,
Those are so much fun.
Other than that, do you mind if I do my plugs, sir?
Go for it.
All right. So it's already happened, but this last Wednesday, because we record this before we do the stream, but it comes out afterwards, was Astral Drive Episode 6. You guys are watching that. I appreciate it. You can definitely comment on those. Let us know if you're enjoying it, what you're liking, what you're not. That is for a system that is coming out from my gaming company later on, probably early July at this point. We're editing it. We're putting the finishing touches on it. But so please check that out. Also, please check out Getting Over. It's been slowly getting some views, slowly climbing up the views. It's a little bit more niche, but it is a professional wrestling promoter simulating journaling game. I created it myself. It is only $4 on Drive-Thru Games, should that sound in any way interesting to you. And all upgrades to it will come to you just for that $4. I'm never going to charge you another cent. And every time I add to it, I'm just going to put it right into that document and you will have access to it. But if you want to see me do it, which is kind of a fever rush of me being on stream by myself, basically telling you the story of a wrestling show, please check that out. I have a ton of fun doing it. I love doing it. I'd really like to have as many reasons to do it as humanly possible, namely people watching it. And then finally, you can check this out. I'm keeping it to just TTRPGs, but the 20th will be our next Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Other Strangeless stream. The Stump Gang will return. So sorry for anybody who watched the last one and saw the sound problems we had. It was my own stupidity. I'm going to try and fix that at some point in the future. But please come back on the 20th. I will make sure the sound is good. Myself, Wizards Respite, and Philbilly330. We're doing Palladium's TMNT with a couple of homebrews that I really felt worked really well this last time. And it's really fun. He plays an armadillo in a cowboy hat with a giant gun. And then Phil plays a conspiracy theory obsessed crocodile. They both are like adopted siblings to these 3 orphan girls. So much fun. I'm going to be running Trucking Turtles for them with a lot of creative licensing. So I'm really excited for that. And I think that covers all my plugs, sir.
Okay. So for me, Wizard's Respite, you may be watching this there because I do put these videos on the Wizard's Respite. It's a site dedicated to TTRPG and all things that are indie gaming. I'm working on a variety of things. The big project I've been working on lately is doing a deep dive into the industry and trying to get some market research done, and I'm making articles about that. So if you're a game developer, check those out. If you're more of a player, I got a bunch of other stuff on there that I think you might like. And then yeah, this show, Astro Drive, uh, again, like
The Stump
according to
Gang!
our time, is what's that?
The Stump Gang!
This and the Stump King, yes.
They're all there, baby.
The playing an armadillo with a thick Texas draw and a six shooter has been so much fun.
That
And
last game, it depresses me that the sound is bad. It was the best game I have ever game mastered or been a part of. You and Phil were so much fun. You both role played so well. The action was amazing. The fights were
yeah.
great. Like the whole thing was great. I just wish I hadn't effed that sound up. It literally, it's like it tears my gut apart. Tears it
And
apart.
like we were saying this didn't happen on the show, but I that night had massive
Yeah, yeah.
tech problems that continued on for multiple days. Zach's having tech problems over here. I mean, I've been saying for like pretty much the last 4 or 5 days, it's just been gremlins are roaming the streets right now. I don't
Right?
know who's feeding them after midnight, but stop it.
Stop
Stop it.
it. They were on top of us that show,
Yeah,
and it was so bad that it was that show.
that
Ah,
was such a good one. That was
all
such a good
right.
game.
Well, I think we're done, man. Like I
Yeah.
said, check out wizardsrespite.com. Please also check out Old Man Gaming. Also check out Axiom Games LLC / Old Man Gaming on Twitter. You can also access my link tree there and all the games that my company has produced so far. We've got more coming. Trust me, probably too many. My partner's getting mad at me because I'm not finishing my edits. but yeah, they're coming. So, all right.
All right. Nights.
Night. All right, we are done, sir.